Hello everyone, this is Bhavisha Sharma from Law School 101 and this video on strong and weak arguments part 5 of critical reasoning is brought to you by Law School 101 for all CLAT aspirants. Statement arguments have a fluctuating proportion in the past year papers of CLAT with an average of 5 to 7 questions in the earlier years which has drastically reduced in the latest ones. Nonetheless, these questions are an important subtopic of reasoning and must be thoroughly understood. To solve these questions, one must understand what exactly is an argument. Merriam-Webster defined arguments as a coherent series of reasons, statements, or facts intended to support or establish a point of view. Basically, it is reasoning put forward to back any idea that is being made by the author. In this type of questions, the examinee needs to determine if the reasoning given in the options is strong enough or not. Here, all given options can be valid arguments for something or the other. We just need to determine which one is strong enough to back up the premise of the statement. Strength of an argument is simply its ability to convince a reasonable person of the merits of its reasoning. Please keep handy a pen and notebook to make notes on this video, which will help you in solving questions while practicing initial few questions. There are no defined steps to one argument as strong or weak, but some factors that strengthen an argument can be listed out. First, the strength of an argument directly depends on its proximity to the statement. A strong argument must always be directly and proximately related to the statement. If the statement is trying to solve one problem and the argument addresses another while barely touching the main problem, it would not be a strong argument. For example, if the statement asks that should we ban all competitive examinations, an argument that supports it saying that it will increase the average household's disposable income in a week income is a weak argument as there is no proximate and significant connection between the two. The indirect connection exists in the manner that when competitive exams are banned, the average household will not spend money on buying of forms and specialized coaching centers, etc. As it is not at all proximate to the problem in question of whether and not competitive exams should be banned, this is not a strong argument. That is, the connection of the argument at the question and the question in the statement must be direct and not too remote. Second factor is the desirability of an argument. In general, the arguments given in favor of or against the statement show why the statement is desirable or not desirable. We need to check if the argument given in favor, which is essentially an advantage of taking the step as given in the argument, is actually desirable by the public. If it is an aggravating factor towards the strength of that argument. Similarly, for arguments against the statement, you need to check if the disadvantage given is actually undesirable to the society as a whole. If it is a strong argument against the given statement. Thirdly, a solution to the given statement must be proportional to the magnitude of the problem posed. For example, an argument supporting the installation of CCTVs in government offices which says that it will prevent corruption is a weak argument as it aims to solve the gigantic problem of corruption by an insignificantly small step of installing CCTVs. Also, this step would create new problems relating to the issues of infringement of privacy, and CCTVs will not be as effective as bribes can be taken anywhere else as well. Hence, this argument would be a weak argument. Similarly, we also have some factors that weaken a particular argument. First, an argument consisting of unproven facts in terms of individual opinions are not strong arguments. Strong arguments are always based on universal and scientifically unproven facts, and individual opinions only weaken the premise. A trait of a strong argument is that it must have enough substance to convince a reasonable person of its correctness. For example, if an argument supports the question that should Indian government invest in space exploration programs by saying that life does exist outside Earth, it would be a weak argument as this fact that of life existing outside Earth has not been scientifically proven, is heavily disputed, and thus is only an individual opinion. So individual opinion weakens the stance of an argument. Second, arguments which are vague, ambiguous, and lack clarity are weak arguments. Such arguments don't usually put forward some strong reasoning or research, but are way too generic and absurd. These arguments are usually devoid of any merit and do not put forward reasoning, but simply support or negate the statement by repetition of question. So, for example, if the question is should reservations be banned, an argument that yes, reservations should be banned because they are bad, or no, reservations should not be banned because they are good, are weak arguments because they are just repeating the question and not giving any reasoning for the arguments posed. Third, arguments that draw unfair and unreasonable analogies are considered as weak arguments. Such arguments seek to convince that just because something has happened somewhere else, results can be achieved by simply importing the policy and blindly following their footsteps, which is usually not the case. These kind of questions are of the example that just because some country or some state has taken some particular steps for development or for better employment, India should also do so, or some, for example, the state of Uttar Pradesh should also do so, just because the state of Bengal has done that. So these are arguments which are based on analogies. So what is the problem in these analogies? That is, fail to identify the difference between the two things that are being compared. Let's take an example. Let the question state that should India withdraw from the Kyoto Protocol? Arguments say that yes, it should because some other XYZ country has, or no, it shouldn't because most of the countries haven't. Both of them are weak arguments. This is so because each country, situation, or circumstance has some peculiarities of their own which cannot be blanketly compared with the characteristics of something else. These questions do not offer enough appreciation for the difference of qualities and hence are weak arguments. Fourth, arguments that are overtly simplified are weak arguments. These arguments do not confuse but are way too simplistic to possess substance or merits in the arguments put forward. For example, let the question state that should Hindi be proclaimed as the official language of India? An argument says that no, it shouldn't, as English should be the official language, or yes, it should, as it would be great for the Hindi speaking community, are both weak as they are way too simplistic to offer any real merits. They're just giving options of whether some other language should be promoted or whether Hindi should be promoted by simply stating that yes, it should be promoted or no, it should not be promoted, and the reasoning that they kind of offer is too trivial and lacking of any great substance. Fifth, arguments that throw back or revert a question at the statement itself are considered as weak arguments. So rhetorics are usually weak arguments. Sixth, arguments that touch only the few trivial aspects of the question while conveniently ignoring the major question are weak arguments because they do not address the problem in the hand with the gravity it should be addressed. They might offer a prima facie reason for supporting the claim, but the reason is usually trivial and insignificant, and thus the argument is very weak. So now we have discussed some strengthening and weakening factors of a particular argument. We'll keep them in mind while discussing the questions. So in this topic of arguments, we majorly have two types of questions. The first type of questions are statement-based questions. In these, a statement is given coupled by one or more arguments that are options, and the examinee is used to identify whether a particular argument is strong or not. Please refrain from letting your own individual biases taking over when you read the question. For example, if you read a question and instinctively make up your mind that it should be answered in affirmative, maybe because your personal interests are vested in it, you tend to think of all arguments negating it as weak arguments. Do not form your own opinions while reading the questions and judge each argument analytically without any prejudices. So, for example, there is a question which is asking, should child marriages be banned? Or for example, let's take the different question that should the ban on child marriages be lifted? That should child marriages be legalized? So most of you will have this overwhelming urge to say that no, child marriages should not be legalized. They are evil to the society and everything. So you will totally disregard the argument that is given in favor of the particular practice, that is child marriage. So there might be some argument that has merits in it. So you need to analyze an argument for its merits and not because of what you think. So refrain from having your own individual opinions and biases, because that will lead to your questions being wrong. Right. Second thing to remember here is, just because a particular argument has some another argument against it, it does not make it a weak argument. For example, some people try solving these questions by thinking that can there be a counter to the particular argument given in the question. If there can be, it is a weak argument. If there cannot be, it is a strong argument. This is a totally flawed approach, because even strong arguments can have arguments that go against them. So a strong argument can be countered by another strong argument. So the strength of an argument does not depend on the existence of counter arguments. You'll get all these points when we'll go through the next parts of the slide, when we'll discuss the questions. So here we will not discuss all questions because there have been many questions in the past year papers. I'll discuss one probably from each slide. You can pause the video after I explain one or two questions to see the questions that I've already written. I've compiled all past year paper questions of this particular topic, and then you can try solving them on your own. And if you have any doubts, you can ask them in the comment section. Let's read the first question from CLAT 2012 paper. Statement. Should the pay scale and conditions of service of government employees be made applicable to private sector employees? Okay, now let's read the arguments. First, no, this will develop inertia, insufficiency, and would adversely affect spirit of competition. This is a strong argument, because this is essentially what happens in the public sector enterprises, that when you have a particular pay scale and the conditions of service that you cannot be terminated from service, and the conditions are much more relaxed, the competition, the spirit of competition that the private sector enterprise has, which drives its two profits, will die, right? And the competition among the employees and the efficiency of the company as a whole, because each employee wants to do better than the other one to get promoted, right? Which is absent in government enterprises, thus leading to inertia and inefficiency. So if you apply that pay scale to private enterprises, that will lead to them being inefficient as well. Hence, the first argument is a strong argument. Second, yes, this will enhance dedication to work and institutional loyalty. I do not anyhow see that how will giving a pay scale to the similar pay scale to private enterprises enhance dedication to work and institutional loyalty. However, we do have instances where the dedication to work will in turn decrease, because the job security that the public enterprises offer, that is the condition of service, will be is not there in public enterprises, and thus people work to sustain their jobs, which is not the case in public enterprises, leading to inefficiency. That's the first argument. So it would not enhance dedication to work, but maybe decrease. So the second argument is not a strong argument, it's a weak argument. So argument 1 is strong, that is option A is correct. You have two questions on this particular slide to solve on your own. Let's read question number 116 on this slide now. Should the age of marriage be raised to 25 years for boys and 21 for girls? This is like one question that people confuse in, so I've chosen this one. Let's read the first argument. No, it is difficult to change a social practice in Indian conditions. So many of you may be tempted to choose this as a valid argument, but it is not. Why? Because the legible age of marriage is not a social agreement or a social practice, but something that has been defined by law. So it is a law that women must be of the age of 18 years and men must be the age of 21 years before they get married, right? So that's the least age of their marriage. It is not determined by some social practice, but legal institutions, right? So it is difficult to change the social practice in Indian conditions. This is totally irrelevant to the context that we're talking about, because here we're talking about increasing the legal age of marriage, not about when should the person get married, right? So legal age of marriage right now is 18 and 21. They're saying let's change it to 21 and 25. So social practice angle does not come here. It is about law. So an argument here where that would say that enforcement of this would be even more difficult, because people have still not got used to the 18 and 21 rule. That might be a strong argument. But here social practice is totally irrelevant, because the age of 18 and 21 is not a social practice but again a law, which they are attempting to change. So first you need to understand, is a flawed argument is a weak argument, because social practice is not what is governing the age but law, right? Let's read the second option. Yes, by that age people develop a sense of responsibility and also complete their education. This is a strong argument, because in general at the age of 21 you attain your bachelor's degree, and at the age of 25 you have a stable job so that you can supply for your family. So not anyhow proclaiming that girls should not have the age of 25 or anything. I'm just giving an argument that because it's suitable for both of them to complete their education and have some and develop a sense of responsibility, because as age increases your sense of a responsibility also increases, sense of maturity also gradually increases in most cases. So hence second would be a strong argument. Thus option B is the correct answer. On the next slide, I'll discuss the question number 147. These are all questions from CLAT 2012. Right. CLAT 2012 had almost 9 one-liners and even 5-6 paragraph-based questions that we'll discuss in the next segment of the video. Question number 147 says that should the judiciary be independent of executive and legislature? Argument 1 says that yes, this is necessary to ensure impartiality in the administration of justice. This is a valid argument, because one reason why judiciary, executive and legislature are kept independent of each other is to ensure that they both are not, both of them, all three of them are not maligned by the or pressured by the other organs, hence independence of judiciary, right? So first is a strong argument. Argument 2 says, no, it will develop inertia in executive and legislature, which is totally irrelevant, because how will the independence of judiciary help in developing inertia in executive legislature? This does not make any, this is not proximate to what the question is asking, and hence B is not a strong argument. A is a strong argument. So option A. And then again you have 2 questions to go through on your own. Then we have 5 questions from CLAT 2010, 5 questions from CLAT 2009, which are comparatively easier. The argument questions are relatively easier once you get the hold of the concept, and you use some of your common sense of whether you would buy that reasoning or not, right? And keep aside your personal biases, and these questions are pretty easy to solve. Let's move on to the type 2 questions now, that are paragraph based. In these questions, a paragraph of 3 to 4 sentences is given. This paragraph purports an idea or a concept, and the validity of this paragraph rests on certain reasons. So questions are asked in either of the 2 forms. Either they'll ask you to choose the option that best supports the paragraph, or they'll ask you to choose the option that best negates the paragraph. Here you apply the basic rules of finding an argument or an anti-argument, as I like to call it, and choose the most suitable option. These questions are comparatively easier than type 1 questions, and one can solve them with greater accuracy even with lesser practice, because you have 5 statements to refer to and 5 statements to get an idea from what the examiner wants to ask you, which becomes a little tricky in the first type questions, because it's difficult to analyze what exactly is the statement saying, and you tend to make the wrong choice in the first go. So, but that's not the case with these. They might take a little more time, but they give more accurate results. Let's read the first type. See, in type 2 also there are many types of questions. One is these type of questions. That is, they give you one statement or one premise, and then they ask you that which of the following, if true, will negate the above statement, right? So if you discuss the first question, it says the Democrats are secularists, and then they ask which of the following statements, if true, would show that the above statement is false. So if you see this from the angle of Venn diagrams, you can see that all Democrats are secularists. So to falsify the statement, you need to prove that there is at least one Democrat who is not a secularist. So if you prove even one Democrat who's not a secularist, your statement, your premise would be falsified. So that is given in option number B, that my father is a Democrat, but he is not a secularist. Right, so this will falsify the premise that was set up by statement number 1, right? So this is how you can approach the next question and these 2 questions as well, because here mostly they're talking about all statement. So if you want to approach maybe 111, you can make a Venn diagram where you can write all smoke is fire. So you have to, here in this question number 111, you just have to prove that there is sometimes smoke, but there is no fire. Right. So here they're trying to say that always wherever there is smoke, there always definitely be fire. You just have to prove that there was one instance where there was smoke, but there was no fire. Right. That's option number A. So 111, the answer is option number A. Similarly, you can approach option number 112. Question number 112. Now let's see what paragraph, like what essentially paragraph based questions are from CLAT 2011. China has a higher literacy rate than India. This is due to the greater efficiency of the communist system. Efficiency is solely lacking in India's democratic system. Therefore, democracy is the biggest obstacle to India's achieving 100% literacy. So, what is the basic premise of the statement? They are saying that communist systems are more efficient than democratic system, and so like this is basically what they are arguing, that because communist systems are greater are more efficient than democratic systems, that is why democracy is an obstacle to achieving literacy in India, right? So to break this particular argument, you can either use the option oriented approach, or you can think that if you break the entire statement that communist systems are greater in efficiency than democratic systems, you'll break the argument, right? So that's option number A, that inefficiency is equally a problem in democracy and communist countries. So when inefficiency is an equal problem in both democracy and communist countries, then your entire argument that because communist countries are more efficient than democracies, China is more literate than India. So your entire argument, like as I just said, is that because communist countries are more efficient than democratic countries, China is more efficient than India. This is your argument, right? So if you break the part that communist countries are more efficient than democratic countries, your entire argument would be broken. So that is option number A. What is option number A doing? That inefficiency is equal a problem in democracies and communist countries. So efficiency of neither is more than the other. Hence, option A is the correct answer. It undermines the above arguments. So here, as I said, you can have arguments in favor as well as arguments in against the proposition. So this was an example of arguments against the proposition, argument that will break the entire premise of the statement. Let's see question number 155 now. Political turmoil in a country is mainly caused by widespread violence and flawed economic policies of successive governments. If at all this has to be crushed, it can be achieved only by a dictatorial government which rules with iron hand. Therefore, the need of the hour is to elect a government which imposes fresh set of stringent legislations. What they are saying is, why does political turmoil in the country happen? Because of widespread violence and flawed economic policies. To crush this political turmoil, you need to have a dictatorial government which rules with the iron hand and has stringent legislations, right? Now they're giving you 4 options. All 4 of them will weaken the premise. You have to identify which will weaken it in the most drastic manner, right? Considerably. Let's see from option number D. Only dialogue in a free society can eradicate political turmoil. This is totally irrelevant because free dialogue and all is not being talked about in the paragraph. Option number C. It is possible to overcome any evil by educating people. Again, it is possible to overcome any evil by educating people, and thus you can overcome the evil of political turmoil also by educating people, right? So you do not have to you don't have to have a dictatorial government or stringent legislations in general. You can just educate people and overcome the problem, right? So this can be a true answer, but let's move on to the option number B. The government is the best government which governs least. This is a totally ambiguous and vague kind of a statement that you do not even have to consider. Option A says, it is not the imposition of new legislations which is required, but effective adherence to the existing legislations. So here, it is breaking upon its premise that you need stringent legislations. See, the major point, the major conclusion that they want to conclude is that the country needs stringent legislations. What option C does is it says, no, you can overcome the evil even by educating people. And what option A does is, stringent legislations like they're saying that stringent legislations are a thing of later time. What you really need to do is work on the adherence and the efficient imposition of these legislation over people. So if the imposition and adherence of these legislations by the people is not up to the mark, then even stringent legislations won't work. So this more effectively breaks the statement. The entire statement is talking about legislation. So even the education option, that is option number C, can also kind of break it, and it would have been a correct answer if only B, C and D were the options. But here option A, it breaks the legislation part. It is more closer to what the paragraph is talking, and it breaks directly on the legislation part, that people are just not adhering to legislations. So even if you make stringent legislations, it would not help in resolving the political turmoil of the country. So for need to solve the political turmoil in the country, you need to have people adhering to existing legislations and not more stringent legislations, right? So you're understanding how it is breaking the premise in a better manner as option number C. This option number A is the correct answer. Similarly, you can attempt option number 1, question 156, 173, 174. These are comparatively long questions, and it would be great if you practice them because you find really less questions from past year papers of this type. And in case of any doubts, you can ask them in the comment section below. For more resources, follow, like, and share our page of Law School 101 on Facebook. Subscribe to our main YouTube channel by the same name, and post your doubts, questions, or queries regarding the video or the questions that were unsolved in the comment section below. These will be replied to within reasonable time. All the very best and happy learning.